Hello and welcome to Let's Improv a Story, a podcast where I normally try not to say let's improv a podcast, though that is what we're doing, as we try to create something that could be made or could be greenlit and could have realistically been made in the past. So today, let's do that, and more importantly, let's try to do the impossible. Let's try to come up with a story for an animated The Legend of Zelda film. Now, they are making a live-action one, and I try not to be negative on these shows, but we'll see what happens with it. I'm not going to mention the parties involved, the Nintendo's involved. I will say that they're making a live-action version, which will be tricky to translate everything into live-action. It seems harder than what happened with, Nintendo and Illumination Studios / Universal Comcast with the Mario movie. Which, you had Mario Galaxy, Mario Odyssey, you had all, and just decades of Mario designs for Super Mario. And you had that to work with. You are putting a barrier between the decades of Zelda designs, especially since in the last 10 years, the designs, specifically in the Breath of the Wild, Tears of the Kingdom games, are phenomenal. They look extraordinary. And the cinematics in those games look great, and the story specifically in Tears of the Kingdom is, that game is a masterpiece. It's absolutely phenomenal. And I won't spoil anything, but the climax of it is just, it's so fantastic and extraordinary and powerful and thematically resonant, and everything we've been doing builds up from gameplay to story to themes to music. All the way, that game has built around the theme of hands. You have this skill called Ultra Hands, and it brings objects together, and the game starts out with, Link having an injured hand and reaching out and barely missing Zelda's hand. This is in the first, minutes of the game, and, when you make friends in that game, they make an emphasis of having a shot of hands clasped or joining, bringing people together, both literally and figuratively. And as you literally and figuratively bring objects together with your ultra hand ability, there's a almost like taunting Link, who got this gloomy, evil stuff on his hand in the beginning of the game in the first few minutes and loses it until they gets a replacement. There's this Gloom Hands villain, which is probably the worst normal villain in the game or enemy in the game. This mire of fast-moving red and purpley and black, sort of slightly glowing, kind of liquidy sludge with these hands reaching up out of it that, race towards you and, attack you. It is a game about hands, about thematically. And anyway, it all built, the ending is extraordinary. It took me a long time, but I beat the game a week ago. And, the shots, the music, the what you're doing is just so amazing that, when I think of the idea of when I had the idea of well, let's try to do a Legend of Zelda. And they're doing a real movie, a live action movie. I'm well, let's just do an animated one. Let's just focus on the extreme difficulty of just coming up with a plot or a story for this, fairy tale adventure exploring, mythical video game series. So let's say the live action one's a big hit and they want to do an animated one, or the live action one fails and they want to do an animated one, like they did with Super Mario. This gets us away from all the how do you translate Zelda into how do you translate it into live action, which is a difficult task that they've set for themselves, and best of luck. Hey, all I want is a wonderful Zelda movie in the world, so I'm rooting for all of them. I believe it's Sony, and the director's name I think is I'm not gonna I forget off the top of my head. I don't want to missay it. So best of luck to them. It is a tall task, and I hope they can do it. As far as what we're going to try to do today, well, I think the first place to start, it's with something like this where you're taking this, this isn't quite like Mario, where Mario has basically no plot. Bowser did something bad. You run through a bunch of fun levels with abilities and stuff like that, and then you stomp on Bowser and game over. with Zelda, these Zeldas have stories. And where you're going from sort of the three masterpieces of, A Link to the Past, Ocarina of Time, and Tears of the Kingdom, you are going through a version of a story, which is probably more detailed as you go through each one of these. And they all tend to have a sort of hook or extra worldly element to them, or extra world literally, which is important. But I guess we'll get to that in a minute. They all, of course, have all of these, and each game is sort of lives up to its title in a way. They all are kind of like a legend, and there's this a whole big thing with like timelines and what game comes when, and this and that and the other thing. And are there any? Is this one a sequel? Are they the same character, different characters? Is it far away? Is it a different timeline? To me, I've always interpreted it as each game is a legend in the games that came before it, unless it really is like a direct sequel. Though even something like Tears of the Kingdom, a quote-unquote direct sequel to Breath of the Wild, all the sort of like Sheikah technology from Breath of the Wild is like, boop, gone. And it just is gone, and once or twice maybe someone's like, that's strange. And I think there is like an old guardian on the top of Purra's tower on Lookout Landing or whatever, but even the is it Fujibayashi, the director? You've got like these three, Shigeru Miyamoto, the genius sort of gameplay designer who sort of lived off of like the feels and inspirations of things, and created Super Mario and Legend of Zelda, and even Star Fox, which Mario, it's like the feeling of jumping and running, and Legend of Zelda, I guess the apocryphal story or real story is he found like a cave nearby his house as a kid, and you went down into the cave, and you make a game about the feeling of going down into a cave and navigating it, and building sort of like from there like puzzles, and the adventure, and there's their treasure and monsters, and then coming out of it and going in another cave, and as well for I guess what the Star Fox video game was in Kyoto, there was sort of these arch kind of gate things, and so he made a game where you sort of go in like a space fighter through gaps and shapes and arches and gates, and the fun of that, the sheer sort of feeling of that fun. And I think in some of the Tears of the Kingdom interviews, the director of this one, Fujibayashi, talks about thinking about how Miyamoto made these games, that in many ways he's just going off of the feeling, and you're building off of that. And again, you talk about something like hands and hands connecting, and that sort of sensation and feeling, and the thematics and symbolism around that, and it is something you can build off of. But also, these games and Nintendo games in general, they get the feeling right. It feels fun. And they take like a gameplay thing and build all the levels off of what it can do, how far Mario can jump, how high he can jump, how fast he can run, and everything, all the distances, all the math is built off of that. And they'll teach you how to do it, and they'll play with it. And these Zelda games are also, they have a strong gameplay element in a lot of these games, a thing you can do, and they take the feeling of it and make sure that feels right. Make sure the gameplay is fun and the feeling is right. And the rest of the things like the stories they don't matter. And the Mario stories, the Zelda stories, well, the Mario stories don't matter at all. The Zelda stories matter within that one entry. But, once you're past that, it's a legend. And much of the previous games, which are, Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom, are huge departures gameplay-wise. They're open world, go anywhere, though you should probably follow the roads. Games, they're very different from the original, much more linear, much more, dungeon-focused games that came prior from the original, but really through Ocarina, through Wind Waker, Twilight Princess, Skyward Sword. So you will have, as you do in all these games, you'll have you'll have Link and Zelda and the Master Sword and Hyrule Castle. You'll have Ganon. You'll have maybe the Triforce, which is not always there. Master Sword's not always there, Ganon's not always there, Triforce isn't always there, but you're making a Legend of Zelda movie. You're putting this in your movie. And, even just mentioning those things, Link is like a forest elf, a Hylian forest. They're all elves, I guess. They have those pointy ears. He's like a forest Hylian, and you can literally just list the things that you would have in a Zelda movie. And as you think about it, as you're listening to them, you start to think like, well, that's essentially a plot in a way. Well, not a plot. But it comes close to an outline. Road maps. I mean, like, you could think of Link, and he's in Kokiri Forest with the Great Deku Tree or whatever, which is a generally reoccurring sort of central point. This large, old, slow-talking, deep-voiced tree. And this point of wisdom or whatever. And you've got those elements, and then he would see a Hyrule Castle, he would see Zelda, he would see Ganon. There would be trouble. He would seek out the Master Sword. Ganon would take charge or whatever. Things would be bad. He'd seek out the Triforce to fix things or whatever, or prevent Ganon from doing it, and then seek it out and utilize it, whatever. As you list these things, and their sort of greater importance or whatever, well, not greater importance, but you list them in many ways the way, in the order they're generally introduced in the games, you start to create a plot. And then, there are the different areas that have developed around the sort of Hyrule Castle that Link always visits. There's he'll visit like a water area, which might have the sort of Zora kind of friendly fish people, or he'll visit, the Death Mountain volcano mountainous area with the Goron sort of rock people. Later on, there's a desert. There are more canyon, I guess. Well, I don't know. What would you call like where the bird people are? In the recent game, there's a lot of snow in that region. So the idea of you sort of take a trip to the world and its different environments, the different peoples in them, is certainly something that also is a part of it too. And as if you're trying to assemble a Triforce, going to different locales to find the pieces would work as well. But most of these games also have like a separate element. Like A Link to the Past has a dark world. I guess the sacred realm of the Triforce has been corrupted by Ganon and turned into sort of a nightmare version of Hyrule, where everyone's kind of monstrous. And let's see, the next sort of like, there are games that are sort of doing the big epic thing, and games that are doing sort of a try something new, like Majora's Mask, where it's sort of a repeating, time loop kind of thing. But in sort of like kind of the mainline ones, Wind Waker, everything's flooded, which is kind of like a mainline one. Well, they're trying something new, and they certainly are. Cell-shaded, Link is young, etc. But it's still wonderful. Twilight Princess, where they're very much sort of trying to do the thing, but there's an element in between Ocarina of Time and I don't know. Nintendo refuses to repeat themselves, and they want to find a new idea and build off of that, and that's why there's so much space between Mario and Zelda entries. They're building something that will last, and they don't lower the prices of these games ever. They are building something that is going to sell for a decade. People will be buying Tears of the Kingdom for a very long time to come. And not, it won't sell as much, but it will just continue to sell. And they'll do sort of remasters and stuff of these things, but they're building something to last. This is not like setting up a shop at the fair. They're building an establishment that has a sturdy foundation and that you want to revisit. They're building, like Disney World or, parts, or what is it, the Universal Studios or whatever. They're building something that will last and that you want to return to, that you like being there. And so they're always looking for a big idea to separate it and make it individualized. Twilight Princess is like a spirit realm, and Link turns into a wolf in it or something. I may not have that exactly right. It's been a while. Skyward Sword, you fly in a bird. There are islands in the sky. That's the game I'm sort of least experienced with. I just kind of was out of games when that game came out, but I think I might play it after finishing Tears of the Kingdom, as I just want to play more Zelda stuff, as I feel so sort of emotionally attached to this world and its characters in this moment, and its music. Its music is a huge part of this. There's a lot of good Mario music and video game music all over the place. I think if you find people who care about music, they'll realize that, people will love movie soundtracks, but they should also love video game soundtracks, because there's a lot of extraordinary music. especially in your sort of classical orchestral vein like Zelda. The Zelda music is very, because Zelda's like a fairy tale. It's like Star Wars. It's it doesn't start out with a long time ago in a kingdom far, far away, as Star Wars basically does, but it essentially is that. And the opening of the original Zelda from '86 or whatever year is essentially like a Star Wars opening. It's basically an opening crawl that says, an evil wizard has taken over the kingdom, and you've got to rescue the princess and use a magic power. It's not the Force; it's the Triforce. And it's not the Emperor or Vader or whatever. It's Ganon, and it's not Leia. It's Zelda, but it's all there. And there's a magic sword. It's not a lightsaber, but it's the Master Sword, though it's not in the original. Either way, this fairy tale the music is extraordinary, and has over the years they just keep adding extraordinary. I mean, there are so many, and I've been looking at so many of them recently. I mean, simple things like the fairy fountain theme to Zelda's lullaby / theme, the original like Zelda game overworld theme, which becomes kind of like Link's theme, the new music in the Breath of the Wild Switch reveal trailer, whatever it is, the one that's very heavy in cinematics and stuff, is incredible. The Tears of the Kingdom music the theme is remarkable, really phenomenal. There's the Gerudo Valley from Ocarina, and the Song of Storms, and the Dragon Roost Island from Wind Waker, which becomes the one of the boss battle themes in Tears of the Kingdom, and is maybe even made like something that's wonderful, made twice as wonderful. There are so many. The Triforce music, it's all really extraordinary, and there's so much of it. And as I say it, it makes me feel like you should. It makes me feel like should basically be Fantasia. The Disney movie. It's basically just an orchestral symphony set to animation. And when I think of that, especially because you have situations where like there's not a lot of vocalization in these games. In the recent ones, in some of the cinematics, you will get. You'll hear voices, but normally it's text. And Link, of course, doesn't say anything other than little, like, hut, oh, ah, like when he's hopping or swinging and stuff. Of course, Mario didn't say much either, except for a few words. And he was successfully vocalized in the movie. And Link has to talk. I mean, he technically sort of does. I mean, and Zelda talks in the recent ones. She's voiced. So... Anyway, I was talking about the added elements, and well, anyway, actually, no, I'm going to go back to the music. The music's extraordinary, and the music can, one of the things, if you're making this movie, X-Men 97 just came out recently on TV, and the behind the scenes of that, like, getting greenlit was Kevin Feige supposedly was, someone said, like, hey, let's do X-Men 97. Let's do, like, an extra season of the animated show. There's a lot of love for it. And I think we could do more. It'd be fun. And he said, if you can get the cast and if you can get the theme song, underlining the importance of this song to, the entirety of the enterprise of making this show. And the music, it'd be like doing Star Wars without the music. The music of Zelda is so extraordinary. If for some reason you don't have that music in the movie, you've lost the plot as we try to come up with a plot. The music will power the thing all the way through, the same way John Williams does for Star Wars. Even in, prequels that aren't as strong, John Williams is still bringing it, because I think he is inspired by the images and the symbolism, which Star Wars, even in its, even in the movies that don't connect as well with the audience, is still full of imagery and symbolism that is just extraordinarily powerful. And if you're just looking at that and responding to that and creating music from that, I often listen to music and think of images or ideas or stories or plots. I wonder if John Williams looks at an image and feels music and sound and, notes sort of rise up within him. Either way, this movie can be, as you try to assemble this thing, and it's difficult to do because these are games, but they do have plots. And in Tears of the Kingdom, there are wonderful moments just in the cinematics or story of the game. Not enough for a movie, but a lot. Enough for like 20 minutes or whatever. And maybe there might actually be like an hour of cutscenes, but you're still separating a lot of the action and climactic stuff into the gameplay. But, as you try to assemble this thing and you have the characters you have sort of plot elements you'll have, things to achieve, master swords, triforces, etc., allies from the different areas or groups. As you add the music on top of it, you start to at least start to feel like there's something there, though you are, of course, missing the plot. You're missing the story. So, to say it correctly, let's improv a story. Now, there is a story to A Link to the Past, there's a story to Ocarina of Time, there's a story to Tears of the Kingdom. And, well, the interesting thing about, like, A Link to the Past is on new hardware, Super Nintendo. Ocarina is on new hardware, and Zelda's now in 3D on the Nintendo 64. Breath of the Wild was originally developed for like the Wii U. I think that explains some of its menus. I think you're supposed to have like a second screen you can tap at, touch screen. But they did come out on the Wii U, I think. But anyway, it's basically held off as a launch title for the Switch. Tears of the Kingdom is a successor to that. I think Tears of the Kingdom, in many ways, is a perfection of it, and in many ways, like, in the same way, like, recently, like, Baldur's Gate 3 came out in early access. There's an element of that to Breath of the Wild, to Tears of the Kingdom. I mean, everything's better. Almost as if it took 12 years to make Tears of the Kingdom and not 6. If you include the Breath of the Wild development. But leaving that aside, and any sort of whatever criticisms or opinions that are, subjective aside, Tears of the Kingdom is a sequel, for the most part, and it's not like, launching new hardware. So they're not just sort of doing the straight up thing, which, I think that's why you get Sky Islands and Ultra Hand, which is revolutionary to the series. And honestly, just having a big open world was revolutionary to the series in Breath of the Wild. So in successive games, you had like, boom, now it's just a big open world where you can go anywhere. Link can jump. And then, boom, it's also, by the way, you can build anything, anywhere, at any time, basically, if you have enough resources of whatever type. And that's, mind-boggling. From, go anywhere to sort of do anything is, or build anything is amazing. And, too much for a movie. You wouldn't want something like Ultra Hand in the movie. I mean, if you're doing a sort of hacky kind of movie, you just squeeze something like that in there and be like, that's pretty handy. But you shouldn't. You should keep it focused. Even like the Mario movie, maybe this is Nintendo's involvement, but like, there's no Yoshi in the Mario movie. I mean, there's like a little bit of them, like, a little herd of them running, and I guess, is there an Easter egg at the end or whatever for a post-credit thing? I think so, but it's not even mentioned, right? You see them running by. In a Legend of Zelda movie, which I guess also plot-wise, as we try to figure out what to do with this, and I guess I keep coming down from like a macro sense, you would have, the plots of these things kind of end up like, it's like Downton Abbey. The Legend of Zelda is like Downton Abbey. Okay, I'm done. End of podcast. There's sort of like an upstairs-downstairs thing going on. Zelda being, the aristocrats, the lords and ladies, etc., upstairs, the rulers, the monarchs, and then, the sort of forest boy, Link, downstairs, which is sort of the, whatever servants and administrative, etc. in Downton Abbey, but, sort of a regular person, on the muddy streets, going through the towns and the forests and the trails and stuff, is Link. And you have those two elements coming together. So it sort of necessitates two plots with a sort of secondary, or sort of a half or a third plot with Ganon. How much you develop Ganon, this is a fairy tale of good versus evil like Star Wars. Like the Emperor is the devil in Star Wars, like full stop. There's nothing else to it. He's pure evil. You do not complicate him. You do not make him sympathetic. He is meant to be the devil. This is, in the end, something that's supposed to teach just fundamental good versus evil to, kids who can now think, age 5, 6, 7 kids who can now think about good and bad, think about morality, and we're going to underline what you do, whether it's, the, Joseph Campbellian heroic myths of, and copying Star Wars is not the worst idea, but the Joseph Campbellian heroic myths of, getting out of your comfort zone, going, answering the call, meeting trials, learning things, making allies, all the things. I don't have it in front of me, but we all know it by heart at this point because it's in a half of every movie, it seems. And, and you return home changed. All that stuff. And all of that to do the right thing on your adventure against something that is unequivocally evil, whether it be the Emperor, Ganon, Sauron from Lord of the Rings, etc. There is no complexity to the villain. That doesn't mean Ganon can't be entertaining or compelling. I mean, the Emperor is a delight. Horrible guy, great hang, if he's having a good day. And so as you try to make a plot for these things, you certainly have a Link plot, a Zelda plot, and I guess a Ganon plot. I mean, it's, if not in the foreground, at least the background. It becomes sort of like what is Ganon's plot actually becomes the essence of how you make a story out of this. Because, is he the ruler of the dark world? Is he just a betrayer who becomes the king and he's sort of also kind of a sorcerer warrior? Is he a demon king as so titled in Tears of the Kingdom? And what, I guess, magical elements is he using? The dark world idea from A Link to the Past is, I would say, not something you'd want to pursue in the first one. Having two worlds makes sense for a second movie anyway, but also there's so much multiversal stuff going on right now in cinema that I don't think, it just seems, it's just overdone. Even though something like, the Spider-Verse movies and animation in general, and this is an animated Zelda project in conception, animation can do multiversal stuff best. You don't have to deal with actors and, with them at different ages or different looks or using different actors in similar parts, and then you've got to get a new actor, and are they doing a similar sort of performance, blah, 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 blah. It's just, you can do animation. And you have total control for something that, with subtle variations or wide variations, you kind of need the control you have with animation. No offense to actors. Like, so-and-so, get younger, get older. Like, you can't do that. Yes, you can do CGI and makeup and all these things, but that is time-consuming and difficult, and there are constraints and, realistic things that'll hold you back. And so you can do, I think that's better for a sequel. I think you don't want to do that right now. I think it's just kind of worn out at the moment. So, and also it's a first entry. You just do the thing is part of it. Go on a Zelda adventure that has the elements mentioned earlier, those elements that basically, create an outline for us. Again, though, you get to the part of what is the sort of special, what is the special magical element? Just like Ganon, betrays the king and uses the power of Hyrule to cast a spell to breach the sacred realm to get the Triforce so he can remake Hyrule in his image or whatever, right? He can become unto God, or make a wish to become one or whatever. To disregard A Link to the Past for now, maybe save that plot for a sequel or something, and let's just, Ocarina's the first one, Link to the Past is the second one, and Tears of the Kingdom is the third one, just to make a little trilogy trip through the masterpieces. Ocarina has a really solid plot structure, but it does involve young Link and old Link. You could maybe have a young Link somehow seeing something or other when he's young if you need to, or learning something. But that to me is almost sort of a Easter egg kind of fan servicey kind of thing. You don't want to change actors. You're probably gonna have young actors anyway, and then all of a sudden you have two actors and one's a kid actor and like a child actor, and that's that can be very difficult. So I would avoid that. But you can probably take the plot of Ocarina, and even if Link is thrown into the Sacred Realm for 7 years while Ganon runs things poorly, he can just have not aged, and maybe you don't want Zelda to be 7 years older, so throw her in there with him. So that plot of like, a movie like this also, this is such you talk about feelings, or to talk about feelings, this is an experience. It is, you are a child in the forest and you find a cave and you go into it and it's dark and wondrous and, it's, how do you get from here to there? How do you cross this? How far do you go? What's in here? Are there monsters? Is there treasure? This movie, it has to look beautiful. You would have the design work, if it's an animated movie, of the history of Zelda, and there's just the core things, the Triforce, the Master Sword, the Hylian shield, they all look fantastic, and they're also resonant. You have all those. You even have the sort of different species or whatever groups on Hyrule, the Zora and the Rito and the Gerudo, etc. And the maybe not the Gerudo, but the Gorons. The Gerudo are. That's you have to debate them. You also have different the Great Deku Tree, all these things. These are good, strong designs that have lasted the test of time. And as I try to not lose the plot here, this is a movie where the music, you have great music, great sound effects, great designs, and you add in, you have to do the work of making great cinematography, and you'll need some great dialogue, but it doesn't have to be, but that's not the part you need the most, because those other things are so strong. This movie is a feeling and an experience. It is sort of like Fantasia with a plot, and to bring it home, there's so much of making sure each sequence is on a moment-to-moment experiential, emotional level, or the emotion of the experience, fun and enjoyable, and not just that, but the mystery and the adventure, the fear and the excitement and the surprise. You have to build out all those things, which is not really the easiest thing to do in a let's improv a story kind of environment. But you do need a story that, allows someone to move from spot to spot to spot. And there will be dialogue, there will be humor. There's a lot of funny stuff in Zelda. There's a lot of, it seems like every NPC, every villager or person in Hyrule is maybe it's part of the translation or whatever, but they always seem like they're kind of a little hyper neurotic or hyper anxious types, and they always seem to be sort of self-doubting but anxious, but also they want a thing, and they're very emotionally strong about it, and it becomes very humorous. There are kind of monstery adjacent characters that seem scary at first, but really they're just like, I just want a baked apple pie. I just really want a baked apple pie. Anyway, do you have a baked apple pie? Not yet? Okay, please come back when you do. I sense a baked apple pie in your inventory. Did you bring me a baked apple pie? Anyway, and they just end up being, hungry or sleepy or whatever. And they're friendly, and that's sort of part of it. The only real, there's Ganon and the sort of his demony monsters. Those are bad, and everyone else is, can be worked with, friendly with, etc., or an ally. I do think the time element of Ocarina of Time is helpful, because then you can really show Ganon, making Hyrule bad, so you can spend the first third establishing, that Hyrule, establishing the world, or even maybe the first fifth, I don't know, and then you establish how things have changed and are bad, and then you've got to assemble the Triforce to fix it. Because you can't really do, I don't think you should do like a secondary world like the Dark World from A Link to the Past. I don't think you should do, and of course you could come up with something new. Yeah, that'd be fun. But also, it's a very unique series, and you want to look at the things that have worked. And sure, you can maybe like take the coolest moments from every one of the games and cobble them together. And that might, there's magic. There's magic. You can do what you want. But I think, so time. Just time. Just having Hyrule become sort of like a post-apocalyptic-y or darkly ruled world by Ganon, like as occurs in the 7-year jump forward in Ocarina of Time, isn't, I don't think it's as fun. And then you have to establish everything, which you do over the first hours of Ocarina. You go to each spot, see how it is. What is it? The Kakariko Village. Oh, did I say Kakariko earlier? It's Kokiri Forest, right? Anyway, whatever. Kokiri Forest is where Link is from, the Great Deku and all that stuff. Anyway, but you go to the Gorons and the Kakariko and the Zora, and then you go there later, I guess, and things are darker. From Ganon's rule. But I think you have to set those up ahead of time, all of them, and as you then return to them, that's really tough. But if you want to keep time, maybe you do more of a Star Trek-y kind of thing and have time fluctuating. Okay. So, Ganon needs something Ganon time. Ganon needs to... Ganon has found the Amulet of Time, with which, and this actually does borrow from Breath and Tears, but that's fine. We're using it for a real true purpose and plot necessity. Ganon has found the Amulet of Time, and with it Ganon can pause time. He will use this at opportune moments to move his way up through the royal hierarchy and to learn things, to defeat, or whatever enemies, until he finally, I guess leads in, a full betrayal or a coup and has some, military involvement, and he can just pause the Hylian army or whatever and just, win, because they can't move. But he is going to use this, and maybe there's something along the lines of there's this the Master Sword and the Sword that Seals the Darkness and the Temple of Time and the Gateway to the Sacred Realm, and maybe the Sacred Realm where the Triforce is, where he wants to get it so he can become a god and have all the power, and that's what he wants. He wants power, much like Sauron and the Emperor. That whatever you need to do to access the Sacred Realm, which I guess maybe has something to do with being heroic and courageous and using, unlocking the unsheathing or whatever, the Master Sword from its plinth or whatever, he can't do because he's evil. So he's going to use the Amulet of Time as a workaround hack to access these, to enter the Temple of Time and access the Sacred Realm where the Triforce resides. This does not work, and instead he tries to make a wish, but instead is sort of repulsed, and that power that protects the Sacred Realm is sort of filtered through his amulet, and it burns onto his hand, and all of Hyrule, and Zelda and Link are there trying to stop him. I guess they've just achieved the Master Sword, started working together, acquired the Master Sword. They are thrown away into time, and okay, so, and the time effect is not just 7 years in the future, like Ocarina and things are bad. The time effect is instead all of Hyrule is, and this is the Star Trek element, rotating forward and backward through time. And I guess if the amulet is sort of, just shot away or something, what's the right way to say? I don't know, maybe it kind of falls into and out of the Sacred Realm, if there are kind of portals kind of happening. Whatever. Magic, at certain points you just got to make things work. And but there are little crystalline shards or a film of it on sort of Raiders of the Lost Ark style on Ganon's hand, so that he himself is now going forward and backward through time, almost sort of Benjamin Button-y. He's young, he's old, he's old, he's young, he's 5 years old, he's 50 years old, he's 500 years old, whatever. And this means that he's unable to sort of, he now has a kingdom where the different regions are moving forward and backward through time willy-nilly, throwing everyone, into chaos. And as well, he himself is going forward and backward through time and is unable to sort of rule it. With this, or maybe the different regions are thrown into a certain period of time in Hyrule's history. Either way, Link and Zelda return. Oh, okay. They get the amulet and are thrown way into time somewhere. And it's just funny. For some reason, I'm thinking of the early part of the Matrix or whatever, but like, the idea that like after this cataclysmic sort of inciting incident or whatever, that I don't know, that all of a sudden you picture Link in like a white button down and like a tie, and he's like in a cubicle or something, or maybe he's like a server at a restaurant, and Zelda's like got a cell phone and is trying to like set up meetings for her boss or something, like she's in the Devil Wears Prada or something, or she's like an assistant to a senator or something. Or a chief of staff or whatever, which is probably more aligned with her kind of like plots in general. And they both see themselves in like an actual like modern day future. And they're like, what? Where am I? Where's Link? Where's Zelda? And they have to like find each other. Like he's still got the Master Sword that he has to wrap up in, I don't know, not like a Subway sandwich bun, but like something. A really tall backpack. I don't know. Some sort of musical case, right? Like you brought your guitar to work, Link. And Zelda's like, that's a really, that's a lot for a necklace, Zelda. I mean, really, you're wearing that? I mean, how much attention do you need? She like has the amulet of time around her neck or something. And they have to find each other and get back to their time period. When you think about like Zelda things in Wild Swings, I guess it is a movie, and maybe you should take a wild swing like that for a few minutes, right? Let's have fun and say they do that. They find each other and use the amulet, but they haven't really used it before. Ganon had it, and they now send themselves back in time. That's where they want to go, but they find themselves too far back in time. They're in darkness, and Link says like, I can't see anything. We need light. And Zelda says, there is none. And he says, why? And she says, it hasn't been invented yet. And then you see and a lot of this is in Ocarina of Time. You see the three goddesses arrive. What is it? I mean, essentially it is. Oh, what is it? It's like one of land, one of power, one of like law or rules or physics or something. But I think they're like red, blue, and green. And you can see them in the distance, and you can see them. You can start to tell that like they're kind of jumping forward in time as they try to get to their time, and you see a sort of montage of essentially the creation of Hyrule by the goddesses, and the creation of they create Hyrule and its peoples, and they then create this Triforce. And maybe show it sealed away in the sacred realm, and then they depart. There's an interesting idea. I'm not even sure if it's fully communicated in the games or its lore or is intended, but it feels like the goddesses made Hyrule, which is like you're a god, you make a thing with sentient living people, and then you leave, and it's like, well, I guess these goddesses have some, self-doubt or humility. They're like, let's just leave this thing called the Triforce. And, we made this place, but let's say we made some errors. Let's say we didn't do it perfectly, or they'd like to make some tweaks. We'll leave this thing called the Triforce, and if they can, assemble it, they can make a wish and change their world with the power that we had. That's nice of us. All right, off we go. That's just very thoughtful of those three goddesses. Anyway, Link and Zelda make their way to the present, and they find that, I guess each realm is in a different time period. Everything's disjointed, and Ganon himself is, we have to find out what's going on at Hyrule Castle. They see Ganon himself as like a screaming 3-year-old, and the guards are like, or the monsters or whatever, or the guards and the monsters are just like, nah. And then all of a sudden he's like 150, and and is just trying to catch his breath to bark out orders. And so they realize, okay, we have time, but we have to access the Triforce, which I guess maybe was thrown out of the Sacred Realm. Ganon did achieve it, but because he was cheating, everything blew apart, and it was shot out into the kingdom or whatever in 3 spots. Or even in 2 spots. Maybe he has one of them, and that's drives him bonkers. And also, you don't want it to be too video gamey. This movie off of a video game, so you just got to get 2 Triforces. Which could be the Zora and the Gorons. Death Mountain and the more like Lake Zora's Domain folks. And so they have to go out to, I guess Death Mountain, and with the Amulet of Time, they can. And this, I think, is a facet of one of the Skyward Sword dungeons. They can reverse and fast forward time. More specifically to, you go to an area and it's like, oh, there's no bridge here. Well, let's fast forward time to a time when there was a bridge. Or you run across the bridge and there are, monsters coming behind you, bad guys chasing you, and you rewind time back to when there wasn't a bridge. So they use this to do the sort of dungeon crawl dungeon puzzle solving that is traditional to a Zelda game, to find their way through these things. Zelda obviously is more of the intelligent, educated, problem-solving type. And I guess maybe they split up, perhaps. Like they go to one and kind of get Zelda situated, then Link goes off to the other. And Link is obviously more of the martial, the physical, the knight, archetype in these stories, in these games. And so, you might want to just do the classic thing of Zelda has to solve like a physical problem and Link has to solve a mental problem. I do wonder, like, hey, is there like an internal joke on these games where Link is always solving like dungeon puzzles when it's like Zelda could solve these in like a minute? Because on the one hand, it's like, well, Link does solve all these puzzles. He's smart enough, but having played the games, if you've certainly done a lot of like, where do I go? What do I do? Or like trying to like kind of cheese your way through, or brute force your way through some of these problems, which doesn't make Link look brilliant. Anyway, so I mean, in the end, what they're going to have to, solve these problems, and you can certainly put them in, situations where they're not familiar, and where Link has to solve a riddle and Zelda has to, defeat an enemy. I mean, they should also do their thing. Zelda can be, brilliant and leaderly, and Link can be, action-packed and heroic and brave, etc. I mean, they're both brave. Anyway, they're going to have to get back to Ganon with the pieces of the Triforce and get the piece from him, which means defeating him, and and then eventually, I guess I can't think of a tremendous, phenomenal climax, which, I don't know, maybe that part of my brain is all drained out after the climax of Tears of the Kingdom so tremendous, but you will defeat Ganon, and he will receive his comeuppance, I guess, and they will make a wish upon the Triforce to fix Hyrule and return it to what it was. I mean, to try to come up with some sort of quick and interesting way of defeating Ganon. Generally in the situations like it's, the bad guy gets close to what he wants, but is, he can. The thing about the Triforce is, my understanding is like anyone can make a wish. So Ganon should probably be trapped in the Sacred Realm, even like anyone can make a wish. Maybe for the movie you create some sort of rule about how you make the wish. You have to almost like speak to, your wish has to comprise, like the Triforce, there's the Triforce of wisdom, courage, and power, I believe. And Ganon always has power, Link has courage, Zelda has wisdom. Maybe the rule in this one is that you have to have 3 people who represent those, and that's kind of a thread throughout the games. And that each one makes a piece of the wish to the Triforce that most corresponds to what's in their heart. And so they have to sort of manipulate Ganon into beginning to make his wish. I wish to have the power over all of Hyrule, too, and then they attack. So they have to actually like feign losing. So like, oh no, Link and Zelda lost. Ganon has the Triforce. And he starts his wish. And, then, I don't know, Zelda had the Amulet of Time and had a fake one that he smashed, and it turns out, Link tosses her one that he'd kept, the real one, and she starts to use it and turns him, into being too young to speak or something again. And he rages as like a 2-year-old for a second, and then grabs the amulet and brings himself back to adult age, and giving Link time to attack and get him away from the Triforce, which Zelda has, magical barrier and sealing powers and magic in a lot of these things, and can, in the Sacred Realm especially, as she's like a descendant of the goddess or something, Hylia, there's sort of a wizardy aspect to her, and she can block him from accessing the Triforce while Link faces off with him. And then, what specific things you do about, like, how Ganon fights and how he loses and all that stuff, and what Link has learned and how, that you can just iron out some other time. But Link defeats Ganon, and then he delivers his part of the wish to the Triforce, which is still just waiting there. Just, 4 magical golden triangle blocks, like they're just sitting there, which he would deliver to the Triforce of Courage. What was Ganon's? I wish to have the power over all of Hyrule too. And Link would say something like, something courageous, to affect all the peoples, no matter how different, in all the areas, no matter how enticing or terrifying. And then to finish the sentence, Zelda says, return Hyrule to the way it was. Or maybe something a little more elegant than that. Either way, boom. You have defeated Ganon, used the Triforce, and fixed Hyrule. And as this gets closer to an hour, I have taken a little too long to solve this one, or to bring it together. And that seems all right. And again, if this is animated, use those designs, use those sound effects, use that music. That music alone will provide a floor on the quality of this that is already quite high. And there you go. The Legend of Zelda, the animated movie, a story, a plot device, a setup and resolution, and, just the general ideas, again, the music and the designs to rely upon. If you're going to do the thing. It should look how it looks and sound how it sounds. Otherwise, you're not doing the thing. You're doing something else. And so, no matter if something like an animated version happens or a live action version happens, I'm so happy when there's a great Zelda game. I would be thrilled to have a great Zelda movie. Absolutely thrilled. I'm rooting for the live action one. If there is a subsequent animated one, like this one is, postulating someday, I would be rooting for that. The next Zelda game, when it arrives in whatever 5, 6, 7, 8 years, I hope it's great. It's such a fun, wonderful adventure and sort of powerful and exhilarating franchise when it's at its best. And it really fills you with that wonder with the simplicity of just being a child and discovering a cave and going inside the darkness and the light and it's treacherous and scary, but exhilarating and exciting. And you want your movie to be that way too. And that's what you want to bring together. And so, again, I'll use all those elements that have been built up before, from the designs and music and sound, to help bring that out in people, and then bring what you need to the story and the dialogue and the, fully fledged characterizations over, 90 minutes to 2 hours. And, and my wish upon the Triforce is that it's great. More great Zelda in the world is always a wonderful treasure to discover. Do as I poorly make that you got a treasure sound effect. All right, I'm online as Throwaway Lines, and y'all have a great week. See you later. Bye.